You think she can fix it? Impossible. Mark Davis chuckled as he stood with a group of engineers, arms crossed, watching the woman in the corner of the workshop. Emily Parker, dressed in a simple black shirt and jeans, didn't seem like much. The other engineers laughed, muttering under their breath. She wasn't even an engineer, just a maintenance worker who had been placed here because of a lack of options. Mark was the senior engineer, the one with the title, the one who had been in the field for years. He looked at her with disdain, assuming that she wouldn't last 5 minutes with the complicated engine problem. Fix that. That thing's a mess, he continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I'll bet you $100 she'll give up in 10 minutes. Emily didn't respond. She simply glanced at him with a calm expression before walking over to the engine, her eyes scanning the parts with a practiced look. Her hands moved with purpose, and she started removing the broken components with the precision of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. Mark watched her, not expecting much. He didn't see the quiet determination in her eyes, nor did he realize the depth of her expertise. For him, Emily was just another simple woman, someone who didn't belong in a male-dominated space like this. He couldn't see past her appearance. Plain clothes, no fancy titles, just the woman who had been cleaning up after them. Emily bent down to inspect the engine, her brow furrowed in concentration. Mark and the others continued to whisper, passing judgment on her. There's no way she knows how to fix that, one engineer muttered. Emily ignored them. She had been ignored her whole life. First by her classmates, then by her family, and now, here at work. She wasn't used to it, but she had learned to embrace it. There was power in being underestimated. As the minutes ticked by, Emily's hands worked skillfully. She didn't rush, taking her time to ensure every part was in its place. She knew engines like the back of her hand, every part, every bolt, every wire. She wasn't just the woman who cleaned up after them. She was an expert, a hidden genius, and today, they were about to see it. The workshop buzzed with idle chatter as Emily continued to work, her movements swift and precise. The engine that had once been an insurmountable challenge now seemed like a puzzle to be solved, and Emily was the one solving it. Mark and the others started to watch, the sneers slowly fading as the realization set in. She wasn't struggling. She wasn't out of her depth. She was in control. The room went silent when Emily made the final adjustment and turned the key. The engine roared to life. Mark's jaw dropped. The others stared in disbelief. Emily stood up, wiping her hands on her shirt, and looked around at the stunned faces. It's fixed, she said calmly, not needing to say more. Mark swallowed hard, his earlier smugness replaced with a stunned silence. He had bet on her failure, but instead, she had done the impossible. And now, in the silence that followed, he realized that his judgment had been wrong. Emily wasn't just a maintenance worker. She was a genius. She had just proved it to everyone in the room. The room was still silent, the hum of the engine now the only sound breaking the stillness. Emily stood, her hands slightly trembling, but her face remained calm, almost serene. She had done it. The engine that no one thought could be fixed was now purring like a brand new machine. Mark stood frozen, his face pale, staring at the now working engine with disbelief. He had expected her to fail. He had expected to watch her struggle and ultimately walk away defeated. But instead, she had done the unimaginable. The other engineers shifted uncomfortably, their earlier laughter now replaced by an awkward tension. They had all underestimated her. The woman they had written off as nothing more than a simple maintenance worker had just proven them all wrong. How did you do that? Mark finally stammered, his voice weak and unsure. Emily didn't answer immediately. She just looked at him, her eyes steady. I know engines, she said quietly. Her voice wasn't boastful, just matter of fact. The truth was undeniable. Emily had been working with machines for years, long before she had even stepped foot into this workshop. She had always been fascinated by how things worked, how the smallest details could make or break an engine's performance. She had spent countless hours learning, experimenting, and perfecting her craft, even when no one was watching. The room was still. The engineers, who had once dismissed her, now stood in awe. Mark opened his mouth as if to say something, but nothing came out. He looked at the engine, then at Emily, trying to find the words, but there were none. Emily didn't wait for him to speak. She knew what was coming next. She had seen this before. People who judged her based on her appearance, based on her quiet demeanor, based on their own preconceived notions. She had spent years proving herself, and today was no different. She had worked in silence, letting her actions speak for her, and now she had earned the respect she deserved. The other engineers were slowly starting to come around, though it was clear they still didn't fully understand. They had witnessed her success, but they didn't yet grasp the depth of her knowledge. Mark cleared his throat, his face turning red. I didn't think you could do it, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily turned to him, her expression still calm. You weren't the only one, she replied. She wasn't angry, just truthful. She had been underestimated her entire life, and now, in this moment, she had proven that judgment wrong. She had done more than fix an engine. She had silenced every doubt, every sneer, and every whisper. She had shown them that she was more than just a simple woman working behind the scenes. She was a genius, a force to be reckoned with. Mark stood, his pride shattered, his confidence deflated. He had built a reputation on being the top engineer in the room, but in that moment, he was no longer the authority. Emily had taken that title from him without even trying. She had simply done her job, and in doing so, she had shown everyone the power of humility, skill, and quiet determination. The silence in the workshop lingered, thick with disbelief and tension. Emily stood in front of the engine, wiping her hands on a rag, her face composed as always. The other engineers had barely moved, their eyes still fixed on the engine, still processing what had just happened. Mark Davis was the first to break the stillness. He took a few steps toward Emily, his pride clearly bruised. I didn't expect this. I really thought it was beyond repair, he admitted, his voice quieter now, almost humble. Emily didn't reply right away. She didn't need to. The engine was enough proof of her skills. Mark had underestimated her, and now he had seen for himself just how wrong he had been. He paused, looking around at the other engineers. We all underestimated you, he said, the words coming out reluctantly, but there was no denying the truth. Emily nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of her lips. It's okay, she said softly. I've been underestimated my whole life. The others in the workshop shuffled awkwardly, unsure of how to respond. Mark cleared his throat again, trying to regain some semblance of control. Well, you've certainly proved yourself today. I don't think I'll ever look at things the same way again. Emily's smile widened slightly. That's the point, she replied. Sometimes, it's not about what people expect of you. It's about what you can do when they're not looking. The words hung in the air for a moment, a quiet truth settling over the room. Emily had always been the one people overlooked, the one people thought was just another woman doing menial work in the background. But now, she had shown them that she was so much more than that. Her skills were undeniable, and no amount of judgment or condescension could take that away from her. Mark took another deep breath, clearly trying to swallow his pride. I think I owe you an apology, he said, his voice sincere. Emily didn't react to the apology, instead turning back to the engine. There's no need, she said quietly. Just remember that people aren't always what they seem. And sometimes, the most underestimated person in the room can surprise you. Mark nodded, clearly still processing the reality of what had just transpired. He stood there for a moment longer before finally stepping back, giving Emily the space she deserved. The other engineers followed suit, all of them now quietly admiring her, some with newfound respect, others with a touch of embarrassment. Emily didn't say anything more. She simply continued with her work, her movements steady and efficient, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She had shown them all her true worth, and in doing so, had gained something more valuable than approval. She had earned their respect. And that, for Emily, was more than enough. The days following the engine repair were filled with a new kind of energy in the workshop. The engineers, who had once dismissed Emily, now looked at her differently. Whispers filled the air every time she passed by. Some were filled with admiration, others with a hint of disbelief. Mark Davis, who had once been her biggest skeptic, now sought her advice on minor repairs and even asked for her opinion on new projects. Emily had earned their respect, but she wasn't interested in basking in the glow of it. She just wanted to do her job. But despite her focus, things weren't quite the same. The atmosphere in the workshop had shifted. It wasn't just the respect she had gained from the engineers. It was the realization that her talents had been overlooked for far too long. Emily knew she was capable, but seeing the transformation in how others treated her now was something she hadn't expected. One afternoon, as she was working on a routine maintenance task, Mark approached her again, holding a set of blueprints. "Hey, Emily," he started, his tone no longer condescending but respectful. "I've got this new engine model coming in. It's a bit complicated, and I wanted to know if you could help me take a look at it before we start." Emily glanced at him, surprised by the request. She had always done the grunt work, the repairs no one else wanted to do. But now, here was Mark, asking for her help with something beyond the usual scope of her responsibilities. She nodded, taking the blueprints from him. "Sure, let's take a look," she replied, her voice steady. They sat together for the next hour, poring over the plans, discussing potential issues, and brainstorming solutions. Emily was quiet, but her mind was racing, analyzing every detail of the new engine, picking apart the problems before they even became real issues. Mark seemed to hang on her every word, something that would have been unthinkable just days ago. By the end of the session, they had come up with a plan to tackle the new model. Mark stood up, offering her a small smile. "Thanks, Emily. I don't know how we would have figured this out without you." She smiled back, but there was no smugness in her expression, no desire for validation. It was simply a moment of quiet acknowledgement that her hard work, her knowledge, had finally been recognized. As the day went on, Emily continued to work on the engine, her hands moving with the same precision and focus they always had. But now, there was a sense of calm confidence in her. She wasn't just the person who fixed things when they broke. She was a vital part of the team. She had shown them all that she wasn't just a simple maintenance worker, that she was capable of so much more. And though she didn't seek validation from anyone, she couldn't help but feel a small sense of pride as she worked. She had earned her place here, not through words or promises, but through actions. She had proved herself. Mark and the others may have been surprised, but Emily wasn't. She had always known what she was capable of. Now so did they. Weeks passed, and Emily's reputation continued to grow within the workshop. The engineers, who had once viewed her as nothing more than a maintenance worker, now came to her for advice, trusting her judgment and expertise. It wasn't just the engine repairs or the fixes she had completed. It was the way she approached problems, the quiet confidence she exuded when faced with challenges. No matter the complexity, Emily tackled it with the same calm, focused determination. Even Mark, who had once doubted her, now found himself relying on her expertise. He no longer dismissed her or assumed she was out of her depth. Instead, he found himself learning from her, asking questions he never would have asked before. "Emily," Mark said one afternoon, "I've been thinking. We've got some major projects coming up, and I think it's time you took on something bigger. What do you think?" Emily looked up from the blueprint she had been studying. "Bigger?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," Mark replied, stepping closer to her. "You've proven yourself with every task we've thrown at you. I want to see what you can do with a bigger project, something that's going to challenge you." Emily thought for a moment. She wasn't one to shy away from a challenge, but she also didn't want to take on more than she could handle. Still, she knew this was an opportunity she couldn't ignore. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "What do you have in mind?" Mark smiled, a genuine look of respect in his eyes. "There's a new model coming in. Next week. It's going to need a complete overhaul. Engine, transmission, the works. It's complicated, but I think you're ready for it." Emily nodded, her mind already working through the possibilities. This was exactly the kind of challenge she had been waiting for. She had spent years working on engines, and now she was going to take on something that could really prove her abilities. The days leading up to the project were filled with preparation. Emily reviewed every detail of the new model, studying its specifications, learning its quirks, and familiarizing herself with the parts that would need the most attention. She knew this would be a test, but she was ready. When the day arrived, the new model was rolled into the workshop, its sleek design and advanced features a far cry from the simpler engines Emily had worked on in the past. The other engineers gathered around, whispering among themselves, some skeptical, others curious to see how Emily would handle such a complex task. Emily didn't let the chatter distract her. She rolled up her sleeves, walked over to the engine, and got to work. Hours passed as she worked with precision, her hands moving quickly, expertly, diagnosing the problems with ease. The engineers watched in silence, their earlier doubts fading with every step Emily took. By the end of the day, the engine was fully repaired, running like it had just come off the assembly line. Emily wiped her hands on a rag and stood back, admiring her work. The room was still, no one daring to speak. Mark stepped forward, his face a mixture of admiration and surprise. "I knew you had it in you," he said, his voice filled with respect. "But this is beyond what I expected." Emily smiled, but it wasn't out of pride. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had once again proven that the only limit to her potential was the one others had imposed on her. She had shattered those limitations. "It's just another job," she replied softly, not needing the praise. She had already earned what mattered most, her own respect and the respect of those who had once doubted her. The next few weeks flew by, and Emily found herself immersed in her work like never before. The success of the engine overhaul had sparked a change in the entire workshop. No longer just the woman who fixed things when they broke, Emily had become the go-to expert for complicated repairs and difficult tasks. Mark and the others continued to ask for her input, but now there was a sense of genuine respect behind their words. It wasn't just about getting the job done anymore. It was about collaborating with someone who truly knew her craft. Despite the shift in how they treated her, Emily remained the same. She still showed up early, still worked quietly, and still focused on the task at hand. The respect from her colleagues, while appreciated, didn't change her approach to the job. It was a simple philosophy: do the work, let the results speak for themselves. However, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. Emily was called into Mark's office. She hadn't been summoned for a meeting in a while, and the feeling of being singled out made her slightly uneasy. She walked in to find Mark, along with the plant manager, Sarah, who had a thoughtful look on her face. "Emily, we've got a new project coming up," Mark began, his voice serious. "It's a big one. We need someone who can handle the pressure and the complexity of the task." Emily listened intently, trying to gauge what was happening. Mark continued, "This new project involves working on a fleet of vehicles that need to be fitted with an entirely new system. It's going to be challenging, and we need someone who can not only fix things, but also design solutions. We think you're the right person for the job." Emily felt a moment of hesitation. This was different from anything she had ever done. It wasn't just about fixing broken machines anymore. This was about innovation, about creating something new. She glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly, her expression conveying the faith they had in her abilities. The weight of the decision hit her then. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, an opportunity to prove that her skills weren't just about fixing what was broken, but about building something better. She took a deep breath, then looked at Mark and Sarah. "I'm in," she said, her voice steady and confident. Mark smiled. "We knew you would be. We're all behind you on this, Emily." Over the next few weeks, Emily threw herself into the project. Every day was a whirlwind of activity, from designing new systems to overseeing the installation process. She worked tirelessly, collaborating with other departments, and using her problem-solving skills to find creative solutions to the challenges that arose. There were times when the pressure felt overwhelming, when the deadlines seemed impossible, but Emily never faltered. Her team, once skeptical of her abilities, now looked to her for guidance. Emily had earned their trust, and she wasn't about to let them down. As the project neared completion, the final test came, a full-scale trial of the new system. Emily watched as the first vehicle was started up, her heart pounding with anticipation. The system hummed to life, running smoothly, exactly as she had designed it. She felt a surge of pride. This was her work, her vision realized. Mark walked over, a grin on his face. "You did it," he said. "We all did," Emily replied, her smile small but genuine. The workshop was buzzing with excitement as the rest of the fleet was tested. Everything was running perfectly. Emily had not only proven that she could fix things, but she had also shown that she could innovate and lead a project to success. Her journey had come full circle, from the woman who was overlooked and underestimated to the leader who had designed and implemented a system that would change the way the entire plant operated. She had earned more than respect. She had earned her place at the table. Months passed, and Emily's work continued to make an impact not only within her department, but across the entire company. The new system she had designed for the fleet was now fully implemented, and the results were beyond expectations. The plant had seen a marked improvement in efficiency, and even the management team had started to notice her contributions in ways they hadn't before. Emily had finally come into her own, but she didn't let the success change her. She remained the same quiet, focused worker who let her actions speak louder than words. The respect she had earned from her colleagues was solidified with each project she completed, and it was clear that she was no longer just the maintenance worker she had once been. One afternoon, Mark called her into his office again. This time, his demeanor was different. He wasn't just asking her to take on another project. There was something else behind his words, something more significant. "Emily," he said, looking at her with a serious expression, "there's a new role opening up. It's a leadership position, overseeing the entire mechanical department. The management team has been talking, and they think you're the right person for the job." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Leadership? She had never imagined herself in such a role. She had always been the one working behind the scenes, solving problems, and making things work. But the idea of leading others, guiding a team, was something completely different. "Mark, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I'm ready for something like that," she replied, her voice steady but unsure. Mark leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. "You've been ready for a while, Emily. I've seen it. You've led every project you've been given with confidence and precision. This department could benefit from your vision. You don't have to take on the responsibility of a title, but you've already been leading by example. It's time for others to see that." Emily was silent for a moment, contemplating his words. The idea of leadership was intimidating, but as she thought about it, she realized that this was another challenge, another opportunity to prove herself in a different way. She had been underestimated her whole life, told that she didn't belong in certain spaces, but she had always risen to the occasion. This was no different. She took a deep breath, the weight of the decision settling in her chest. "All right," she said, her voice quiet but determined. "I'll take it." Mark's face broke into a smile. "I knew you would. You're going to do great." As Emily left his office, she felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had always been a problem solver, someone who took on challenges and faced them head on. But now, the challenge was not just fixing problems, it was leading a team to solve them together. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, discussions, and adjustments as Emily settled into her new role. She was tasked with overseeing not just repairs but improvements, innovations, and strategies to make the entire department more efficient. It was a lot to take in, but Emily approached it with the same calm focus she had always carried. She worked closely with the engineers, listening to their concerns, offering guidance, and ensuring that every project was executed with precision. As the weeks went by, Emily's leadership began to shine through. She wasn't just managing the department. She was inspiring her team, leading them through challenges, and fostering a sense of collaboration and respect. The engineers, once hesitant to follow her, now looked to her for direction. They respected her not because of her title, but because of her ability to lead by example. Emily had finally stepped into the role she had always been meant for, and as she stood in front of her team, leading them through yet another successful project, she realized that this was only the beginning. She had come a long way from the quiet, underestimated woman who had once been overlooked. Now, she was a leader, someone who not only solved problems, but also empowered others to do the same. Months had passed since Emily took the leadership position, and things were running smoothly. The department had undergone a transformation. Projects were completed faster, more efficiently, and with greater collaboration than ever before. Emily's approach was simple yet effective. Listen to the team, guide them, and set clear expectations. She had built a culture of trust, where every engineer felt their voice was heard, and their expertise was valued. The once skeptical engineers now saw her not just as a capable leader, but as someone who could truly take the department to new heights. They respected her not because of the title she held, but because of the consistency and integrity with which she led. One day, as Emily walked through the workshop, she noticed the team gathered around one of the larger projects. A new prototype vehicle, a challenge in itself, had just been delivered, and it was in need of some serious adjustments. Emily saw the concern on the faces of her engineers. They had encountered a complex problem, one that required both ingenuity and teamwork. The room fell silent when she approached, and she knew they were waiting for her input. Without hesitation, Emily walked over to the prototype, her mind already working through the potential solutions. She spent the next few hours examining every aspect of the project, talking to the engineers about the possible issues, and brainstorming ideas. It wasn't the first time she had faced such a challenge, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. As they worked through the problems, Emily kept her focus, encouraging her team to think outside the box, to challenge the conventional solutions, and to collaborate. By the end of the day, they had found a solution, a better, more efficient design that would improve the vehicle's performance. The team was thrilled with the result, and they were eager to move forward with the new design. Mark, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, walked up to her with a grin. "You know, Emily," he said, "I think you've officially turned this department around. You've taken us to a whole new level." Emily smiled, but didn't say much in return. For her, it wasn't about accolades or recognition. It was about the work, the results, and seeing her team succeed. "We did it together," she replied, her voice steady. Mark nodded. "True, but you led us there. You've earned more than just respect. You've earned our trust." As Emily walked back to her office later that evening, she reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the woman who had once been the quiet maintenance worker, overlooked and underestimated, and how she had transformed into a leader who guided her team through challenges and celebrated their successes. She had proven, time and again, that capability wasn't determined by titles or appearances, but by the work you put in and the way you carry yourself. Emily had achieved what no one thought was possible, not through boasting or self-promotion, but through action, consistency, and the quiet strength of her leadership. The department was thriving, and it was clear that the journey wasn't over yet. With each challenge, each project, and each success, Emily continued to prove that the path she had taken, one of hard work, humility, and dedication, was the true measure of success. As the months passed, Emily continued to lead her department with a calm and steady hand. The respect she had earned from her team was now undeniable, but it was something she had worked for, not something given freely. Her ability to innovate, to solve problems, and to guide her team through challenges had made her an integral part of the company's success. But even as she rose through the ranks, Emily never lost sight of what had gotten her here in the first place: the belief that hard work and determination could break down any barrier. One morning, as Emily was reviewing a new project proposal in her office, she was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. She looked up to see Sarah, the plant manager, standing in the doorway. "Hey, Emily, do you have a minute?" Sarah asked, a small smile on her face. "Of course, come in," Emily replied, setting aside the proposal. Sarah walked in and took a seat across from her. "I wanted to talk to you about something," she began. "There's a major conference coming up in a few months. It's for leaders in the engineering and mechanical industries. We've been given the opportunity to send a representative, and the management team thinks you're the perfect person for the job." Emily was taken aback. She had never considered herself to be the kind of person to speak at a major conference. She had always preferred to let her work do the talking. "Me?" Emily asked, her voice filled with surprise. Sarah nodded. "Yes, you've proven yourself time and again, and your leadership has really stood out. We believe you're ready for this." Emily felt a mix of emotions. This was a huge opportunity, but it also came with a certain amount of pressure. Speaking at a conference was something entirely new. She had always shied away from the spotlight, preferring to work quietly behind the scenes. But as she thought about it, she realized that this was another challenge, one that could help her grow even further. "I'll do it," Emily said, after a moment of thought. "I'm honored. Thank you for believing in me." Sarah smiled. "We're confident you'll do great. I'll send over the details later today." As the days went by, Emily began preparing for the conference. She worked on her presentation, gathering data, and refining her ideas. She wasn't just representing herself. She was representing her entire team, the department that had helped her get to where she was. The night before the conference, Emily sat in her hotel room, reviewing her notes one last time. The nerves were starting to creep in, but she reminded herself that she had done the work. She had led her team through difficult projects and had earned their respect. Now, it was time to share that experience with others. The next day, when Emily stood at the podium in front of hundreds of industry professionals, she felt a surge of pride. As she spoke about the projects she had worked on, the challenges she had faced, and the innovations her team had brought to life, she felt a sense of purpose. This was her moment. She had come a long way from the quiet woman who had once been dismissed and overlooked. By the time she finished her presentation, the room was filled with applause. Emily stood there for a moment, taking it all in. She had done it. She had stepped into the spotlight, and she had proven that she belonged. As she left the stage, several people came up to her, congratulating her on her presentation and asking for advice. Emily was no longer the woman who had to prove herself. She was the one others looked to for guidance. As the conference continued, Emily felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known before. She had faced every challenge, every obstacle, and had come out stronger on the other side. She had earned her place, not just in the department, but in the industry itself. She had proven to herself, and to everyone else, that she was more than capable. She was a leader, an innovator, and someone who would continue to break down barriers and shatter expectations.